"Dear Peter," he said, "what's that?" He said, "I want to go out on the pier and stick a big sign up, Save the Pier." Oh, he says, "That sounds like a good... I'll come with you." So I said, "Well, I'll have to work it out." So I said, "But we want headlines before next Tuesday." He said, "Well, that might do it, mightn't it?" And also Tom Foden, who was Commander Foden. I used to do a lot of work for him at his house, and I knew him very well. And of course I liaised with him over the pier. And I told him what I had in mind, and he said, "Well, I'm with you, I'm with you." So anyway, I thought, right, what we'll do, I had a dinghy, a pram dinghy, which I knew would be no problem back there, as long as the weather wasn't reasonable. So I decided, the best way to do this is 2 sheets of hardboard, 8x4. So that meant we had a 16-foot long sign, 4 foot high. And I painted the letters on each one and then cut them up as separate letters, because there was no way we were going to get 2 sheets of hardboard into that little dinghy. And it was about 8 o'clock, and it was January, I don't know, whatever the date was, late January, Friday night. So I'll make that point Friday night, because that comes up again later. I put the dinghy on the roof rack of the car, drove up here, met Peter, and there was no one much on the beach, just 2 people, and they were hanging over the rails. And I think Peter and I said, and then Tom Foden turned up, and Tom, who was obviously Commander Foden, ex-Navy, you'd think he was on some sort of commando because he was wearing a dark bowler suit, a navy woolly hat, and his face darkened. I don't believe this, but that is absolutely true. And he was going to be the beach party to keep an eye open, and obviously to make sure if we had a problem that he could alert somebody. But that was, anyway, 3 of us arrived, and there were just 2 people, a couple, leaning over the rails, and obviously they thought, "What are these idiots going with a boat?" So we got the various bits in, and I turned to Peter, and I remember saying, because I thought I could see them being a bit inquisitive, I said, "Peter, I've got the fishing rods, have you got the bait?" "Oh yes," he said, "I got it in the bucket here." So that was simply to if they, and I think they sort of, "Oh, lunatics going fishing at this time of night." We got out onto the pier, no problem, because I timed it right anyway, just before high water, so that we didn't have too much of a run of tide, and I knew that we could be back in before the tide turned, and we were well, you wouldn't have struggled to get back in, but we might have finished up in Lady Bay on the way out with a 5-6 knot tide running. Anyway, we got out there, and all the starlings, at that time the starlings had been using it as a roost because it had been isolated for 6 months, or whatever, since the October, and it was a mess. It was a real mess, starling muck everywhere. But it was surprisingly light. That was the one thing that Peter and I were sort of going around. We almost as though we were afraid we'd be seen because of all the light. It was surprisingly light out there. So anyway, we tried up the staging, tied up, got the dinghy tied up, and got the gear on to the pier, and did the necessary laying the letters out along the railings and wired them there, put the Union Jack on the top railings, which was provided by Tom Foden instead. And back in, and no problem, and that really was it. That was of course, the next day, the headlines were what we wanted. "Daring group risk lives to save pier." And this is where Bernard Faraway comes in again, a day or so later. He said to me, because no one was supposed to know who it was. Well, they didn't, but there were quite a few people who could have a good guess, and this is what Bernard Faraway said, "It was you, wasn't it?" And I said, "What do you mean it was me, Bernard?" He said, "You put that sign up." He said, "Nobody else could have done that." He said, "Because nobody else would have had the knowledge to do it." I said, "Well, I don't know about that." He said, "Anyways, I criticised whoever it was." He said, "But bloody good job, bloody good job." Tom Foden, you see, once we'd done this, he'd gone back home and phoned up the press to say that something had been going on the pier, and they should be down there to And that sort of went from there.